Savannah's Piglets, adapted by Cheryl L. Nelms from a folktale. Just after the Civil War, when the American frontier was still being settled, few people lived on the Kansas prairies. Savannah, her mother Liza, and her father Jackson were some of the first black pioneers in that Indian country. They came west in a covered wagon and bought a farm along the Blue River from the Pawnee Indians. Jackson was a hard-working farmer who loved his wife and daughter. He'd started out working the cotton fields of Georgia as a slave, but now as a free man with his own farm, planting acres of field corn in the spring and trapping red fox and mink by the river in the winter. Liza, also a former slave from Georgia, now enjoyed keeping house, raising chickens, and growing vegetables in the garden for her own family. Savannah enjoyed helping her mother take care of the chickens. She liked flinging golden kernels of corn around the yard for them to find, and she liked searching for plump, warm eggs in their nests. But Savannah did not like the feathers. She hated pillow-making time. That was a very sneezy job. Savannah also helped her father with his hogs. She liked to watch the black and white Poland China hogs crowd into feed, squirming and pushing and squealing. The hogs always reminded Savannah of her cousins sitting down for Christmas dinner. Liza, Jackson, and Savannah all worked hard. They sold their corn, hogs, furs, and chickens for good prices. They lived a good life along the Blue River until one Wednesday morning when Liza woke up feeling nauseous. Savannah hoped it was nothing serious, perhaps something Liza had eaten that didn't agree with her, but that's not what it turned out to be. Liza had cholera. Many of the pioneers passing through Kansas on the Oregon Trail had been dying from cholera, and now Liza had it too. She died on Monday morning in the stifling August heat. Savannah helped her father bathe and dress her mother's body in her favorite blue velvet dress. Savannah fixed her mother's hair one last time and pinned it up. She helped her father lift her mother into a homemade cottonwood coffin, then helped carry it out onto the quiet Kansas plain. Jackson prayed a long, solemn prayer, and Savannah sobbed amen. They buried Liza on the tree-shaded hill behind the house. Savannah did the best she could to help her father by cooking and cleaning, washing and mending, and feeding the chickens. She also sold their eggs and chicks and helped tend the hogs. But that winter, Jackson grew more and more sad. Savannah tried everything she could think of to make him happy, but nothing worked. One day, about a year after Liza had died, Jackson went to town driving his 2 mules with a wagon load of corn. He came home later that evening with a skinny woman in a red buggy. Oh my, thought Savannah as she glanced out of the front door. What has happened to my pa? He was so sad. Now look at him. He's smiling. He looks so happy. Savannah could not believe her father's words when he marched into the house and began to speak. I have found someone, Savannah. Someone to love me again. I've been so lonesome since your ma died. Now I have Billy. I met her this spring when I went to Marysville to buy seed corn. She came all the way from Kansas City to visit her sister. I've gotten in the habit of spending some time with her whenever I went to town. We enjoy each other's company and have decided to get married. I sold the corn, the wagon, the mules, the hogs, and the chickens. Now we can both go with Billy to live in Kansas City. I'm staying here, Savannah said without a pause. Ma is buried here. The farm is here. This is where I belong. Okay, Savannah, her father replied reluctantly. You may stay. After all, you're almost a grown-up. You can live in town in the winter with the Ottens. In the summer, Amos Otten will stop on his way to the sawmill to check on you. Thank you, Pa, Savannah said, but I wish you would stay here too. Savannah, her father said, this may be my only chance for happiness. I may not have another chance at marriage out here in the middle of Kansas. I wish you would come with us. I love you, Savannah, but I must go. Goodbye, Pa. I will miss you. I love you. If you need me, I will be here. Remember me. And so they left, but only after Billy had rifled through all of Liza's belongings. She took a trunk full of Liza's dresses, including a beautiful red dress that Savannah loved, the utensils, and all the dinnerware. Now Savannah's father was gone, her mother was dead, and her mother's keepsakes were looted. The wagon was sold, as were the mules, the chickens, and the hogs, all gone, Savannah thought as she looked around the empty rooms of the house her father and mother had built. Well, at least he didn't sell the farm, she thought, glancing out the window toward the river. A farm, paid for by her parents after years of hard work. The land where her mother now rested, the land where her father had just abandoned. Savannah decided to hike up the hill to visit her mother's grave. As she made her way up the path, she noticed something black moving behind the empty chicken coop. Savannah stopped still, watching. Slowly, carefully, a mud-covered snout peeked out from behind the corner of the coop, then another, then another. Savannah counted 10 little pig noses wiggling at her. "Pigs!" she exclaimed. 10 baby pigs. Where did you come from? Were you hiding down by the river? Is that where you got so muddy? My pa sold your mother and father. He sold all of your other brothers and sisters. You are orphans. Poor baby orphans." Savannah thought to herself. We're all orphans. Savannah glanced around the yard. What to do with the helpless piglets? She decided the chicken coop would be best. It had worked for the chickens, and it ought to keep the pigs safe from coyotes and foxes. "I will put you in here for now," she whispered as she shooed them through the open door. "At least I'll know where you are." Once she had the pigs in the chicken coop, she sat on a fence to think. "I am all these poor little piglets have," she thought. "I must feed them. But what will I feed them? Pa sold the corn." Then she remembered the ears of corn still in the field, bushels and bushels of corn. Her father had sold the corn he had already harvested, but the fields were still nearly full of ripe ears. She knew what to do. She would gather the ears of corn in her mother's old bushel baskets and carry them to the pigs. Savannah knew that corn was the best food for pigs. Her father had taught her that. She gathered heavy baskets full of corn and trudged up the hill. It was worth the effort. Her little pigs ate greedily. As time went by, they grew bigger. Savannah built a fence around the chicken coop so the pigs could trot outdoors whenever they wanted to. Meanwhile, Savannah started tending the garden. When her mother was alive, they had a huge garden. Savannah had helped plant and hoe rows of vegetables. It was hard work, but Savannah could do it. This year, her pa had planted the garden, but it had been neglected. To get the garden back into shape, Savannah had to water it well, weed it thoroughly, and pick the vegetables. It turned out to be a good garden. Savannah knew how her mother stored the seeds from year to year, so she dried and stored some for her own spring garden. In October, at harvest time, Savannah had bushels of vegetables. She stored enough for herself in the cellar, then packed sacks of extra turnips and potatoes and took them to town to sell. She took 6 of her fattest pigs to town to sell, too. They had grown so big that there wasn't room for all 10 of them in the chicken coop during the winter. With all the money she made, Savannah bought back her father's mules. Then she filled sacks with peas and beans from her garden, tied them onto the mules, and led them to town. Savannah sold her peas and beans and bought back her father's wagon. In November, Savannah told Mr. Otten she had to stay at the farm to take care of her mules and pigs. Somebody had to feed them. She couldn't just let them starve. He agreed and said that he would check on her from time to time. He said it looked like she was doing a pretty good job of taking care of herself and the animals, and that her father would be proud of her. That made Savannah feel good, but it also made her feel sad. She missed her father. She missed her mother, too. As winter approached, Savannah realized that the garden would not keep her busy for much longer, so she decided to see if she could find her father's traps. When Savannah got to the shed where her father had kept his furs, she saw the rusting traps hanging at the back of the shed. She decided to use them. They were just going to keep rusting if they hung out there without someone scraping and oiling them. Savannah set her trap line through the timber along the Blue River. She had helped her pa so many times, she knew how to set the traps and cover her scent. She was happy to have something to do through the long cold winter. Savannah was glad her mother and father had shown her how to do so much. She could build a fire, cook potato soup, bake bread, skin a rabbit, and tan a hide. Meanwhile, in Kansas City, life was not so pleasant. Billy was not the person Jackson thought he had married. She was always complaining about something. She was not as kind and cheerful as she had been when they were courting. Billy did not have a mansion as she had claimed. Instead, she lived in a peel and gray boarding house. Jackson had to spend half of his money to buy a decent house for them. Then Billy managed to squander the other half on frilly dresses. By spring, Jackson was pacing the floor at night, unable to sleep. What could he do? Nothing was ever good enough for Billy. Nothing was ever fine enough. He finally decided to leave, to go back to the farm in Kansas. After all, he was a farmer. Farming was all he knew. Even when he'd been a slave in Georgia, he'd been a farmer. He could not make a decent living in the big city. He told Billy that she could come with him if she wanted, but he was leaving. Billy decided to ride back to the farm with Jackson. He guessed that Billy just didn't want to risk losing her fringed red buggy. He wondered if she valued the buggy more than she valued him. Savannah was furrowing the soil and planting corn when she noticed a brown dust cloud swirl down the hill. She stopped working and stood up. "It's too early for Mr. Otten," she thought. Who could it be? When she finally recognized the person driving the buggy, she could hardly believe her eyes. "Pa! Pa, is that you?" "Oh, Pa, I have missed you so much," she hollered as she ran down the fence row. "Whoa," her pa said, stopping the buggy beside the cornfield she was planting, and stepped to the ground. "Savannah, I've missed you. How could I have left you? I was so foolish. I had everything I needed right here," he said, looking around at the fertile fields. "What have you done with our farm, Savannah?" He stood there amazed. "It's beautiful. Your corn rows are so straight. Why, you're a better farmer than I am." "Oh, no, Pa," Savannah said. "I was just trying to keep the orphan pigs fed. That was all. They needed food. I was only trying to keep us all fed." "Well, I'm home now," he said. "I'm home to stay if you'll let me. I'm a farmer. I belong on this land. I'm not a big city person. I love you, Savannah. You're my daughter. Billy doesn't need me. I'm back if you'll have me for your Pa again." "Yes, Pa, of course I'll have you." They both heard the crack of a whip as Billy jolted away in the buggy, its fringe flapping in the wind. Jackson bent to hug Savannah and then looked around at the straight rows of newly planted corn. "What a good job you did, my Savannah girl. A real good job. I'm so proud of you. Proud to be your Pa. You saved the farm. You are my real happiness. You gave me something to come home to. And I have brought something back for you, Savannah girl," her father added, stepping out the front door and returning with a suitcase. "Go ahead, open it," he said. "Oh, Pa," Savannah gasped after she lifted the heavy lid. "Ma's beautiful red dress. You saved it for me. Oh, thank you so much." Savannah and her father continued to farm along the Blue River for many prosperous years. Savannah always remembered the happiness she felt when her father returned. She also kept her mother's red dress until it was time to give it to her own daughter years later.